Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're watching us from. This is James Kuriah. Welcome to today's video. Now, today we're going to analyze 9 important steps that you can take to get out of bad debt. And I'm talking about bad debt. I mean debt that you use for your personal needs, or debt that you use for consumption and not necessarily business. So debt is not bad. It's simply a question of how do you use debt. For example, if you can take debt to develop a property, later sell that property, earn your profit, pay back the debt, then that is an example of good debt. All right. So let's say, for example, so I'm using this is Microsoft Word. So if the debt is, for example, let's say the debt is 9 million at an interest rate of, let's say, 9% per year, and let's assume that you take maybe 2 years to pay the debt. Now, let's make it actually 10% per year, because I think this is actually something that is quite realistic, something that is quite on the ground. So 10% of 9 million translates to 900,000 per year, which is equivalent of 1.8 million for the 2 years. All right, for the 2 years. Now, so in total, assuming that probably we are not compounding this interest, then you need to pay 9 million plus 1.8 million, which translates to 10.8 million. Now, assuming I decide to develop a property worth 15 million, all right, using the 9 million, all right, using the 9 million. So I develop a property using the 9 million. Let's say here we're using the 9 million and sell it for, let's put 12 million. That's a bit realistic, not too high. So with this 12 million, I can actually use it. I use it to pay the 10.8 million debt. All right, and then the profit here will be 12 million minus 10.8 million, which is approximately 1.2 million profit. All right, so this is an example of good debt. All right, so let's write here good debt. All right, bad debt, on the other hand, is, for example, you take a loan. Let's assume, let's define the bad debt in 3 terms. All right, so the terms and conditions. Probably this debt is you need to pay it after a month, all right, or even an year, very short terms. And let's say the interest rate is at 10% per month. All right, so, and then the use of this debt is that you actually use it for consumption or personal needs, which means that you're actually not using this debt to accrue more money. All right, so let's take, for example, you take a debt worth 100,000. all right, so the debt is 100,000. The interest rate is 10% per month, which is actually 10% of this is 10,000, which means if in a year you will pay 10,000 times 12. All right, 10,000 times 12, which translates to 120,000 plus the original, which is 100,000. So which means you will pay 220,000. All right, that is in total. Now, because you used this debt to consume or for personal need, you haven't actually earned any income. So which means that you still have to pay the 220,000, and you didn't use this money to start a business that could have earned you an income or a profit. And worse off, probably if you default, there might be, let's say, an interest rate of, assuming 0.5% penalty daily. All right, so this is an example of good debt. Well, this is an example of bad debt. All right, so I've shown you the examples of bad debt and good debt. So I think it's not something that is new right here in our country, which is Kenya, because I am a Kenyan, that people do actually have debt. All right, and actually Kenya has, I think the debt is now at 11 point something trillion, which is approximately 12 trillion. And we have been warned even by the World Bank that we are accruing debt at a rate that is not reasonable, and we need to actually take action, because we are now at repaying debt at 67% of GDP. That is, for every 100 shillings, 68 bob or 67 shillings goes towards paying debt, which is actually something that is not good. But anyway, we are not here to talk about public finance. We are here to talk about personal finance. So these are practical steps of how you can actually get off bad debt. And as I'm actually telling you this, I'm also advising myself, because I have also been a victim of bad debt, and I think this is a wake-up call. I am sharing this to help somebody who probably is in bad debt or is contemplating of taking a loan without actually assessing the consequences of that loan. All right, so there's good debt and bad debt. It's all a question of the interest rate, the terms and conditions, and how you're going to use that debt. All right, so that is not bad. It's a question of the terms, conditions, and how you plan to use it. So if you're already in bad debt and you need to get out, these are the 9 practical steps of how to get out. And actually, this information is courtesy of ChatGPT. We're actually using AI to gain information, and I think these are absolutely steps that make a lot of sense. So step number 1 is that you need to stop taking new debt immediately. You see, taking debt can get to a place whereby it's actually an addiction, and it might end up hurting you more than you can imagine. So step number 1 is that you need to stop taking new debt, because as you can see here, what they're saying is that you cannot get out while you're still digging deeper. All right, so for example, if somebody is already in a hole, they cannot get out if they continue digging deeper. And the analogy is that you need to start figuring out how to get out of that hole. So that is step number 1. Step number 2 is that you need to know the exact numbers. All right, so there's power in numbers. Okay, there's power in numbers, and you need to know the exact numbers. That is, write down the total debt that you owe, the interest rates, the monthly payments, the lenders, and due dates. All right, and as you can see here, this is actually a very good example of a spreadsheet that you can actually use to track down your debt. All right, so for example, if I come here, Microsoft Word, of course you can use an Excel, Microsoft Excel. Oh, this is actually Google, not Microsoft. So Google Excel sheet. So in this case, I'm gonna insert a table, and we're gonna use how many columns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's okay. And as you can see here, they've told us that we need to write the lender, the amount, the rate, the monthly payment, and the due date. All right, so right here, the lender, the amount, the rate, the monthly payment, and then we have the due date. And you can see they've actually given us a very good example. So for example, if you have a lease of 40,000, I don't know whether the people actually have a lease of 40,000, because I mean some people actually don't even have very good limits. I mean, some have limits of $100, 500, 1,500, 2,000. But anyway, let's assume that they, for example, a certain lender, let's call them T, and the amount is 40,000. This is the amount that is owed, and the interest rate we can give it at 10% per month. So the monthly payments, we can say that you're going to pay them on a monthly basis, so that is like 44,000. And probably say that the due date is let's say put 31st, right? That is the end month. So you go listing all the lenders that you owe together with the amounts, and then here at the end you can actually put total. Right, so for example, let's say you owe 1 million. This will actually help you to know how much you owe, and when the due dates are, and at what percent. I think this provides a realistic picture of the situation on the ground. That is, to know how big is the hole that you've already dug, right? And it's important to know this so that you don't live in denial. Right, this helps you to actually know that how much you owe, when you're supposed to pay these people, so that you can now work out a plan on how you're going to repay. All right, so once you have done that, you need to now prioritize which debt to pay first. All right, and you can see here they have actually said there are two strategies. One is the avalanche method, which is best financially, where you pay high interest rate first because it is the most expensive, right? And then there's method number 2, which is the snowball method, which is best psychologically, in which you pay the small debts first for motivation and quick wins. All right, so assuming that I have debts of 50,000 here, maybe 100,000, and then maybe 200,000. But the interest rate here, probably this one is 15, this one is 20, this one is 13. All right, so if I actually follow the avalanche method, I'm supposed to pay the high interest rate first. All right, so in this case, high interest rate will be this one, right? Because it's accruing more money as the days goes by, right? At 20%, let's say, per month. So according to the avalanche method, I am supposed to pay this first. All right, but if I follow the snowball method, then I'm supposed to pay the least amount first, so that it can give me motivation to pay the bigger loans, right? So you can follow 2 steps: either pay the loan with the highest interest rate, or pay the small debts first, so that you can gain motivation. That's step number 3. Now step number 4 is that you need to reduce your expenses aggressively, which means that you need to change your lifestyle. You see, life is all about earning money, spending, so that if you spend less than you earn, you'll have some spare money which can either use to save, to spend even more, or to invest. Right, so which means that you have to cut unnecessary things like eating out, upgrading, new clothes, subscriptions, alcohol, luxury, holidays, non-essentials. Right, so Not an easy step, because we are all used to a certain way of life. And if you are living in a 2-bedroom house, downgrading to a 1-bedroom house might really stress you. And of course, not many people are actually comfortable when it comes to changing their lifestyle, downgrading, right? But I think the main advice right here is that you should ensure that every shilling saved goes towards paying debt. Remember, these debts are accruing at a certain rate every single month, so you don't have much time to actually pay the debts, right? So if you can save every shilling that goes towards paying that, then that would be good. If you don't want to cut down your expenses, because there's a limit to how much expenses that we can actually cut, because at a certain point it actually becomes suffering, right? So if you're not willing to cut expenses, you need to increase your income, which is actually a very important step towards cutting debt, all right? Because if you owe 1,000,000 shillings and you earn, for example, 100,000. If you earn 100,000 per month and you owe 1,000,000 shillings, if you actually use the total, which is impracticable, it will take you 10 months to pay off the debts. All right, that is also assuming that the debts are not accumulating per month. But because the debts are accumulating per month, it might actually take you more. Now, realistically, if you're earning 100,000, probably be able to save 50,000 and leave off the 50,000 per month. And so it will take you double which is 20 months. But 20 months, which is approximately, let's say 1 3/4 years, because 2 years is 24 months. 1 3/4 years to pay this debt. All right, but because the debts are accruing per month, it might take you longer. And that's why I'm saying there is good debt. If you get a debt that is actually accruing per year, you have more time. You'll actually be able to pay it at a shorter time. But if you have a debt accruing at an interest rate of something per month, it might actually take you long. All right, so you need to increase your income. For example, look for side jobs, turn your skills into money, sell unused items, take temporary weekend jobs, start micro businesses. So the faster you increase your income, the faster debt disappears, which is absolutely true. I have actually realized that most Kenyans don't have a spending problem. Most Kenyans have an income problem. Most Kenyans have an income problem. Now, step number 6 is that you need to negotiate with your lenders. This is actually a very important step, because if the interest is very high, then it will be practically impossible to catch up. If the payment period is short, it will also be very difficult. I think one of the most important things is to do what we call debt consolidation. All right, so for example, if I own 1 million, I can actually go to maybe a bank or SACCO or a microfinance institution, take a 1 million loan, maybe at an interest rate of 10% per year, maybe for, let's say, 3 years. And of course, the bank will break it down for you how much you have to pay every single month to be able to pay off this 1 million. But you can see this 1 million will help me to pay these other debts that I actually already owe. And so I will have, like consolidated or, merged all this debt into one single debt with one interest rate at a certain percent per year. and be able to pay it for 3,000. So for example, maybe the bank or the SACCO can tell you to be paying 30,000 per month for the 3 years. All right, so 30,000 per month for 3 years is let's see how much it is. So year one it will be 360,000. So times 3 translates to what? 18 carry 1 million. I think something like 108. All right, so 108, which is 1 million. Which makes a lot of sense. All right, so 1,080,000. So in this case, the 80,000 will be the interest rate that the bank will accrue over that period of time. And this actually makes sense because I mean you'll be able to pay the other loans. That is step number 6. Step number 7 is that you need to create a debt repayment budget. Right? So look at your income and ask yourself, how much do I want to dedicate towards paying debt? For example, if you're being paid 100,000 per month, you can decide that you're going to have your expenses at 40,000, and then 50,000 goes to debt, and then 10,000 goes towards saving. And it's important to actually save so that you don't go back to get more bad loans. So you create a small emergency fund to avoid borrowing when problems come. Then step number 8 is that you can actually automate your payments. I think this is something that you can actually negotiate with your bank or with your lender, probably if they have an app or a mechanism whereby the money that once your money hits the account, it's actually cut automatically, goes towards paying the debt. Then number 9, you need to track your progress weekly. So this is important because I mean if you don't track how you're doing, you cannot access what you need to readjust. All right, so those are the 9 steps that you need to clear debt, and I'm going to repeat them. Step number 1, stop taking new debt. Step number 2, know exact numbers, create a list like this, an Excel sheet. Number 3, you need to prioritize which debt to pay first. Number 4, you need to reduce your expenses. Number 5, which is very important, increase your income. And number 6, negotiate with your lenders. Number 7, create a budget plan. Number 8, automate payments. And number 9, track your progress weekly. So ladies and gentlemen, paying debt is not easy, but it is possible. I believe that with discipline and a very good plan and focus, so that you're actually focusing on earning more, you can pay your debt. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I pray and I hope that you'll be able to come out of bad debts and use good debts to actually become wealthy and increase your income. So that's it for today. Remember to like, share and subscribe. My name is Jaymes Kuriah. See you on the next video.